Brett Favre needs no introduction. Before the NFL Iron Man walked into this room, you know who he is, you know what he's done. But as a 17-year-old Kill, Mississippi high school senior, barely a soul knew Favre's name, nor what he could do on the football field.
The day before signing date, up to that point, I had basically two choices: Delta State and Pearl River Junior College. And so, and that was it. And Coach McHale, he did all he could do to get me signed. And he told not only myself, but he told Mom and Dad, and numerous times said, there's no way. Really, the night before the signing day, I remember I was at my aunt's house, and actually I was babysitting. Coach McHale had called. This was before cell phones, and I guess he'd called or got in touch with Mom and Dad or something somehow, and called me at this house. And in his raspy voice, he said, "Son, this is Coach McHale. Would you like to come to Southern Miss?" And of course I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, one of our guys backed out, and was this other quarterback from Florida. I don't know where he went, what happened." And he said, "Look, we're going to offer you. Love to have you." Of course, he knew I wanted to go there. And he said, "You know, I told him you can do everything. I know you said you can punt. You said you can play defensive back. You said you can play quarterback. You just come in and just have an open mind, and we'll see what happens."
Hopes were high and momentum was on his side as Favre entered his senior year at Southern Miss. But then a horrific car crash left him fighting for his life.
I had a car wreck July 14th, so a couple of weeks, 3 weeks after I ended up having surgery, because I just never had an appetite, and what little bit I would eat, I would throw up. Well, come to find out, and that, from a non-medical person, the way I heard it was that my intestines had basically died. Most of the time I was half looped with pain medication, but I get this call, and it says, the coach from Alabama wants to talk with you, head coach from Alabama. That was Gene Stallings' first game as an Alabama coach. So I remember putting the phone up, and I thought it was Bear Bryant. I was somewhat hallucinating, I guess, but he sounded just like Bear Bryant. And he just, and it's been a long time, but he more or less said, "Young man, this is coach with Alabama." And he may have even said his name, but it didn't register. But you know, we're scheduled to play you guys, and hopefully you can make it. But more importantly, I hope everything works out, and you know, you get back on your feet again, and just know we're pulling for it. It was a great phone call. And I remember putting the phone down, and I don't know if Mom, Dad, brothers, I don't know who all was in there, but I said, "I just talked to Bear Bryant."
Favre and the Eagles went on to defeat Alabama 27-24 and Auburn 13-12, both in thrilling comeback fashion. These and many other records and accomplishments at Southern Miss earned Favre the 33rd overall pick in the 1991 NFL Draft.
When I was drafted by Atlanta, and this was back when the draft took place, and then right after the draft, and they may still do it, I don't know, but right after the draft, every team has a mini camp. And you go to your team, they have a press conference, and like a 3-day mini camp. And so I get drafted by Atlanta. They set up the travel arrangements. The next day, there was 2 flights, if I remember, out of Gulfport into Atlanta. And this was going to get me there in plenty of time, an hour and 20-minute maybe flight. And we're delayed in Gulfport. I can't even remember why. I don't think it was weather, but we're delayed. And I got no other options. Delayed and delayed and delayed. And finally I take off. And I'll never forget the guy who picked me up at the airport, Danny Mock, who later came to work for Green Bay as a scout. And he picks me up, and it's just the two of us. And I don't know how familiar with that setup. The airport was way down south Atlanta, and Sewanee was way up in the northeast side of Atlanta. It was easily an hour. You get in traffic, and it could be 2, maybe even more. And he and I are talking the whole way. You know, he's talking about how excited and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And he said, I just want to forewarn you, we're going to be late for practice. You know, understandably so. I mean, I was delayed, whatever. So when I get there, I go right in and put my stuff on. They are out there practicing, and I just remember thinking, man, what a way to start. You know, it can't start no worse. And so I'm walking out on the field, and Danny is walking me out, and Jerry sees me coming and starts walking over there, and he's got his cowboy hat on, he's got his dark sunglasses, and he's in some shorts, and he's got his horn in his back pocket as he always did. And he comes over to me, and Danny says, Coach, Brett just picked him up. He was delayed at the airport. And the first thing Jerry says to me, he said, Mississippi. He says, what school are you from, Mississippi? And I said, Southern Miss, Coach. And he said, Southern Miss? He says, gosh, dog it, we drafted the wrong guy. We wanted the guy from Mississippi State. And I thought, this is not starting off the way I wanted it to.
Although things did not work out in Atlanta, they did in Green Bay. Most notably to Favre, a monumental and emotional Monday Night Football performance that epitomized the Hall of Famer's indomitable grit and insatiable competitive spirit.
I've been asked the question so many times about should I play, shouldn't I, you know, what kind of went into that decision process. Well, it was the decision to play was an easy one. You know, we've been sitting here talking about my dad and growing up and football and baseball and driving home and talking football and at breakfast talking football. I mean, you know, there was never, Brett, how you doing in math? You know, how you doing in English? You know, what went on in school today? It was football or baseball. And so when I say that Dad would have wanted me to play, that's the truth. And that was the easy decision. The hard part was to be able to block out what had just happened and for 3 hours separate. I got to go home and bury my father and deal with all that. To be able to put that aside for 3 hours. If I play and play badly and maybe even be a reason why we lose the ball game or be the reason why we lose the ball game, I mean, he ain't gonna go for that. You know, and I could hear him saying, boy, if you play, you better play good. And that was easier said than done.